Donald Trump has made many promises about what to do with U.S. financial regulation. We're going to get to that, but I want to start with you on European banking and, in particular, Italy. You're buying into the rights offering being conducted right now by UniCredit. Why?
I tell you why. Because this is an institution that has a core footprint between core Europe, Germany, Italy, and they basically had an NPL problem due to the Italian recession. GDP.
Non-performing loans.
Non-performing loan. Italian GDP went from 100 to 90. It's now on its way back. And so I think there is value. We are raising capital at a 40% discount to theoretical value. It's a huge rights issue. And I think as a result, it's a great entry point to play European recovery. And I think 2017 and 18 could be a European surprise, as too many people are obsessed about political risk, and I think political risk is not as high. It reminds me of the risk of people says Donald Trump could be elected in October, November in the States, and when it did, then the markets took off. I think the same is going to happen in Europe.
Let's try to quantify your optimism. UniCredit shares are trading slightly north of 12 euros, about 12.15, 12.20. How much upside is there to that stock?
I think, you just think about it in this way. Revenue minus cost, it's the so-called EBITDA, the pre-provision profit of an institution. I think right now they are less than 3 times. So in US context, it's like when Bank of America was trading at $5 in 2009. So I think you could easily have a double up in UniCredit share price.
Over what period of time?
I think it's going to take 2 to 3 years.
Doubling in 2 to 3 years.
Yes.
So you're building a position right now of what size?
So for us, it's going to be probably one of our key positions. So we're talking about 7 to 8% position across our equity strategy. And we already,
big.
Yes, and we already own a lot of credit in it. They've issued a hybrid debt, so it's like a trust preferred. It's called Additional Tier 1 in Europe, yielding 9.5% just a month ago. And we took $120 million of it.
So you're effectively doubling down already. You bought credit, now you're buying the rights offering. Are you going to triple down and buy some of the NPLs that they have to blow out?
We're also the largest investor in NPL in Italy in the secured space. They did a huge transaction, like 16 billion. We're not set up for that size. Pinco was a cornerstone investor with them. We are looking more at loan by loan, asset by asset in the secured space. And I know they will have to auction lots of assets, and it will be there. We've already bought assets from them.
As everyone knows, UniCredit is not the only Italian bank with an NPL problem.
Yes.
There's a huge NPL problem. It's been sized north of 350 billion euros. The finance minister, Piercarlo Padoan, says the non-performing loan issue at the Italian banks will, quote unquote, cure itself. What is he talking about?
Now, I think let's go through the numbers. The actual NPL is about 200 billion. Then you have 160 is what they define watch list, unlikely to pay. Of that
That's how we get north of 350.
Exactly, 350. But in reality, of the remaining 150, less than 60 will actually become NPL. So the actual NPL stock today is 200, will be within 2 years 260. Against this, you have a cash coverage provision of about 140. So you have a net of 120. The 120 has collateral value for 150, 160. So there is collateral value vis-a-vis the actual net. So there are 2 questions here. First, is there a big macro problem? The answer is no, because you have 160 of collateral vis-a-vis 120 of net. Now, you had concentration issue. So you had a couple of institutions, Monte dei Paschi, Veneto, Vicenza, UniCredit, which had way too much non-performing loans. And they had to raise equity. Some could, some couldn't. And so I think overall now we're at the phase where given 20 billion capital raise from UniCredit, 7 billion asset sale, 13 billion capital raise, 20 billion public bank
in the rescue fund.
In the rescue fund. Add 4 or 5 billion of Atlante, you basically have 45 billion of equity out of 120 equity and NPL. So I think the issue
is not a big leverage ratio.
So right now I think we're okay. So it's not an emergency. Now, what does it mean though? Now it's the hard time. You actually need to execute and start shrinking this NPL, which is what the ECB has asked all these institutions to do. So you're going to see banks selling portfolio, which is one of the reasons why we are actually raising our NPL fund 2 of up to €1 billion. We deployed 500 million over the last 2 years, And I think risk reward there continue to be exceptional.
What about Intesa and Generali?
Intesa
Does the merger
Generali
make sense?
I think, listen, it's, let's put it this way. Generali, it's a 160-year-old institution. Intesa, it's a bank. 15 years ago, Intesa started selling life insurance product. Today, Intesa, it's a bigger life insurance company than Generali. So in 15 years, they became bigger than Generali over 160 in life. So clearly, Intesa knows how to sell life product. Then the issue is, domestically, there could be synergies on the non-life side. Differently than the US, where here you have lots of monoline. As a retailer here, you have your mutual funds, you have your credit card, you have your insurance provider. In Europe, you go same shop, they cross-sell you. So if you look at Crédit Agricole, Natixis, Société Générale, the average bank sells 7-8 products, like Wells Fargo would do. In Europe, there is a scape. In Italy, there is a reason for more cross-selling. What is not clear are the capital synergies, the execution cost, the overlapping. So I think right now it's more a case study, like a love affair rather than an actual offer.
Let's talk about European banking more broadly. It sounds as though you're most certainly positive on UniCredit. The future of the Italian banking system, okay, the word that you described. What about the rest of Europe? Right? Britain is leaving the EU. Elections are coming in France and Germany. Tensions are rising again right now over Greece, between Greece and the IMF. The Trump administration is crying foul, right, over the price of the currency.
Okay, so let's start with political risk. I was in France last week. I'm on the French-Italian bilateral, the two private sector state meeting. I think the probability of having either Macron as president, it's very high. That could be extremely positive for France because basically you'll get a guy that does not think left or right, but thinks forward or backward. That will be key. If that happens, I think market will be wrong-footed. They're all too bearish. In Germany, I think Schulz's appointment at the SPD, so the socialist in Germany, is fantastic news. The guy is truly pro-European. And the Trump administration and Brexit, I think it's the best thing that could have happened to the EU. And the reason is because so far it was too comfortable to be in an European Union where you always looked at the US when you had to take a decision. The US is saying, listen, we're going to look after ourselves. Brexit in the UK is doing the same. So Europe needs to come together and say, are we together or not? And if we are, what's the program?
So it sounds to me as though you think the chances of a Eurozone breakup are diminishing.
The European breakup, it's a fantastic Anglo-Saxon wet dream. It's great for media. Lots of US investors have played and lost money against it. This is a political project that started 70, 80 years ago. And I think, in particular time of Brexit and Donald Trump, European values will be seen as unique. Think about it. In one day in the US, you have more people being killed than we have in 1 month with 500 million people. So it cannot be that bad, yeah?
Since you invoked Donald Trump, let me ask you a question about U.S. deregulation. Last week, he ordered a review of Dodd-Frank and put a halt to the fiduciary rule proposed or implemented by the Department of Labor. That day, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley popped more than any other bank. What is the market telling us?
The market is telling us two things. The first, I think in US financial, we're pricing now blue sky scenario. So we're pricing that basically the Fed hike rates, that Donald Trump will bring back regulation, and that we go back to what I would call semi-cowboy days. I think the fiduciary trust rule is key because these are complex products. When you go in a pharmaceutical shop, you want to make sure that the pill they sell you, they do what it says on the tin. I think financial institutions are complex institutions, and when people trade with them, they need to have a fiduciary trust. So I think here the Fed, the regulatory side, will fight Donald Trump. Now, that does not mean the regulation can be reined back in every area. For example, Basel IV makes no sense. There has been too much capital being put on SME loans. In America, if you don't have a 750 FICO score, you cannot bank with one of the top 20 financial institutions. That means 50% of Americans cannot take credit from the top 20 banks. So that's an issue.
What's the bottom line to this blue sky scenario? All of these banks are overvalued?
No, I think upside from here is very, very limited. And so, for example,
Fully priced.
Fully priced, or around that. Remember, this is not a science, but it's an art. And those that think it's a science, I think they're wrong. So our view, we had a huge weight in U.S. financials, 20, 30% over the last 2 years. I always said JP Morgan will print $5 to $6, will be a $70 stock. It's now 76. When Morgan Stanley was at 20, I said that was one of the best investments you could make. It's now $40, $44. So now what we've done is pare back and sold 70, 80% of our US financials.
Really?
And we're redeploying capital in Europe, where people remain bearish, where they keep on talking about Le Pen, European breakup, and terrorists. And we think it's time to invest in Europe. And we think it's going to be the surprise for the next 2 years. Let me tell you one number. Last year, European GDP in Europe stronger than the US. Now, no one would have thought that 12 months ago. That's a fact.
Davide, I thank you so much. Great seeing you.
Thank you.